Westbridge, Texas, autumn of 1884. The last livestock auction of the season settled like dust in the throat, dry, drawn out, and full of the kind of men who'd trade a soul for a saddle. The sun leaned low over Westbridge, casting long streaks across the stock pens. Horses shifted in the dusty stillness, and a bay mare stood trembling at the back gate, ribs sharp through her hide, flanks striped with dried blood. Colter Grange pulled his hat low. He wasn't a man known for wandering into town without a reason. Supplies, maybe. A horse if needed. But not this. He stepped toward the pen and saw her. A girl no older than 19. Barefoot, hair stuck to her face, dress torn at the hem. Her arms hung quiet at her sides. There was a rope tied to her wrist. The other end was held by a man with a bottle in his hand and a sneer on his face. When he noticed Colter watching, he lifted the bottle and grinned. "Got a package deal," he slurred. $1. That's it. You take the horse, you take the girl." Laughter flickered from the rail. One man spat into the dirt. "She don't talk," the drunk continued. "Don't hear either. But she works, cooks, don't backtalk. Cheap help, far as I'm concerned." The girl didn't react. She didn't cry or plead. She just looked at Colter, her eyes steady, giving nothing away. He turned halfway, ready to leave. But then he saw something in her eyes. Not desperation, not even hope. Recognition. Like she knew him. Like she saw him in a way no one else ever had. The drunk stumbled closer, rope held out like a leash. "Come on, a $silver fare. You want the horse? You take the girl." Colter hesitated. The mare snorted behind the girl, froth curling from her nose. The girl didn't move. Her feet were white with dust. Her silence louder than anything. Colter reached into his coat pocket, drew out a single silver coin, held it up between two fingers, then dropped it into the man's open palm. "I'll take both." The laughter from the men nearby turned low and mean. "You buyin' stock, Grange?" someone muttered. "Or startin' a collection?" Colter said nothing. The drunk yanked the rope to hand it over, but the girl flinched back, instinct sharp. Without a word, Colter stepped forward, loosened the knot around her wrist, and let the rope fall to the dust. "She's yours now," the man said. "Don't come crying when she stops being useful." Colter didn't answer. He gave the mare's lead a gentle tug and turned toward the wagon. The girl followed. Not behind, beside. They moved through the crowd without another word. When they reached the wagon, she didn't wait for a gesture. She climbed in slow, curled up in the corner like someone used to being forgotten. Colter stepped up to the driver's bench. Just as he took the reins, he felt it, light as breath. A brush against his coat sleeve. He glanced back. Her hand had touched him. Once, just enough to say something without saying it. Then her eyes drifted to the hills, not back to the men, not to the town. Forward. Colter snapped the reins. The wagon rolled out of Westbridge, wheels creaking over hard earth. The sun slipped lower, turning the sky a slow, solemn gold. Behind him the girl, bought for $1, sat without sound beneath a worn blanket. She never looked back. Neither did he. The road home stretched long and narrow between low hills and fading light. Dust rose behind the wagon wheels, then fell quiet. The sky turned from brass to ash, and the chill came in with it. In the back of the wagon, the girl didn't shift or speak. She stayed curled beneath the old blanket, her back to the town, her face turned toward whatever lay ahead. Colter drove without looking over his shoulder. He wasn't the kind of man who filled quiet just to hear himself speak. He listened to the rattle of tack, the tired huff of the mare, the steady rhythm of wheels over dirt. By the time the wagon creaked to a stop outside his house, the last light was gone. The cabin stood in silhouette, squared timbers, low roof, chimney trailing smoke. It wasn't much, but it held. He stepped down. She didn't move right away. Then, without prompting, she rose and followed. She walked with bare feet across the cold porch without flinching. Inside, he lit a lamp, its glow stretching into the corners of the single-room space. The kitchen was plain. Iron stove, oak table, a few cabinets. The only warmth came from the hearth, where a small fire crackled. She didn't ask where to stand. She didn't ask anything. She just stood by the wall and watched. Colter ladled water into a tin cup and set it on the table. She stepped forward, picked it up with both hands, and drank slow. Still no words. After a while, he opened the drawer beneath the stovetop and pulled out a stub of chalk. Crossed the floor, tapped the edge of the wooden doorframe with his knuckle. Name. His voice was soft, even. Like the question wasn't owed, but offered. She stared at him for a moment that felt longer than it was, then walked forward, quiet and calm, like she knew exactly what he meant. She crouched beside the frame and pressed the chalk to the wood. Her fingers were steady. 5 letters, slanted, soft. I-R-I-S. Colter read it once, then again, slower. Iris, he said aloud, letting the name settle in the room like the dust they'd left behind. She didn't smile, but she stood, nodded faintly, and turned toward the back door. Without a word, she stepped out into the cold and crossed to the barn. Colter didn't stop her. He stood still, looking at the name she'd left behind. Not just letters scratched into wood, but a beginning. A name he hadn't known he was waiting to learn. The sun broke late through a haze of frost, warming the pasture in patches. A thin wind moved through the grass, too cold to stir much life. Colter stepped outside, coffee in hand, and caught sight of the barn door hanging slightly open. He crossed the yard, boots sinking into thaw-soft ground. Inside, beams of pale light filtered through gaps in the slats. Dust swirled like breath. The bay mare stood trembling in the stall, head low, eyes dulled. But she wasn't alone. Iris knelt beside her. One hand moved gently across the mare's side, dragging a damp cloth down the length of a scarred flank. The other hand held a strip of cloth, already stained from work. She didn't see him. Or maybe she did, and didn't need to say so. Colter leaned on the doorframe, arms folded. He'd seen men try to treat a horse like that and get kicked clear across the stall. But the mare didn't flinch. She just stood there, still, breathing, and let Iris work. There were no instructions, no asking, no hesitation, just quiet rhythm. Like she wasn't tending a wound. She was listening to it. That afternoon, the air turned strange, warm in places it shouldn't be. The wind shifted. The sky took on a copper tint. Colter stepped out to check the smaller calf pen behind the shed. One of the young ones had gone off its feed, and he was halfway through checking its leg when he heard the barn door bang open. Iris, barefoot again. Hair whipped around her face. She didn't yell, just ran toward him and grabbed his sleeve, pulling hard. He dropped the bucket. "What is it?" She pointed past the ridge. Then, without sound, she trembled. Not from cold, from urgency. Colter took one step toward the pen, and then the world split open. A bolt of lightning struck the old oak behind the shed, full force. The flash was white and blinding. The air cracked so loud it knocked the breath from his chest. The tree screamed as it tore in half, flame racing down its spine. Sparks rained into the dry grass. The mare in the nearby stall bucked against the wall, panicked. Smoke rose fast, black against the sky. Iris stood just outside the shed, her silhouette lit by firelight. She didn't run, didn't flinch. She had known. Not after the first gust of wind, not after the thunder, before. Colter stared at her bare feet in the dust, her eyes fixed not on the fire but on him. She had pulled him away before the strike hit, before the flame, before the world bent sideways. He didn't understand it, not yet, but he believed it. That night, after the fire was doused and the smoke cleared from the roofline, they sat at the table again, 2 tin mugs, 1 low flame, no words. Iris wrapped her shawl tighter but didn't hunch. Colter glanced at the silver dollar lying near the stove. He hadn't thought about it since that morning in Westbridge, but now it looked smaller somehow, colder. He picked it up, turned it in his palm. "That's what they said you were worth," he said quietly. $1. She didn't look at the coin. She looked at him. Then slowly she reached across the table, not to touch the coin, to brush his sleeve just once. Then she sat back, not asking for anything, not offering anything either, just there. He set the coin down gently beside her cup. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone at his own table. 2 days later, Colter walked the back pasture with his hat in hand. The grass was still brittle underfoot, the color of old paper. The wind stirred now and then, but not enough to say anything. At the edge of the field stood an oak tree, old and slouched, its roots curled around stone. Beneath it sat a grave, no cross, no flowers, just a simple chiseled marker pressed into the earth. E. Grange, 1819 to 1870. No epitaph, no claim. Colter stood there a while, staring at the name, his father's. He had been 17 when the land became theirs, handed over with a deed still damp from war. Nobody asked where the last family had gone. Nobody wanted to. He'd lived here ever since, fence post by fence post, acre by acre. But the land had never sat clean in his gut. Behind him, the soft crunch of footsteps broke the silence. Iris. She stopped a few paces back, her hands wrapped in the ends of her shawl. Her gaze moved from Colter to the grave, but she said nothing. She didn't need to. "I never earned this place," he muttered. "Not really. My father took it in the middle of someone else's storm." He swallowed. "I never buried the guilt. Just carried it." She came closer, carefully. Not like she was afraid, but like she didn't want to interrupt something long held. Then she reached out and placed his hand over his own chest. Held it there. Not to comfort, to remind him where the weight really lived. Then without a word she stepped past him, knelt by the grave, and brushed a few leaves from the stone. Her fingers grazed the top edge, slow and deliberate, as if reading what wasn't carved. She'd never been told what this place was, had never seen the name, but she'd come anyway, because she knew. That night, Colter dreamed of fire again. Not lightning, cannon fire. Dirt churning under boots, shadows moving through smoke. His father's voice came through it rough and close. "I gave you the land, son, and I gave you the blood on it." He woke with a start, sweat at his neck. Silence all around, except for the glow near the hearth. Iris sat in the rocking chair, wrapped in her shawl. A candle burned low beside her. Her face was still, watching the flame. On the table, just within reach, lay something small and blue. A handkerchief, worn soft with age, trimmed with crooked stitches. His mother's. He hadn't seen it in 10 years. It had been locked away in the oak chest beneath the bed, a place no one touched. "Iris," he said softly. She didn't look at him. She just stood, stepped to the door, and left him there in the quiet. She didn't need to explain how she'd found it. Some things aren't searched for, they're just understood. 1 week later, the first whisper didn't come with thunder. It came while folding linens. "She watches the cattle too close," said Martha Weaver under her porch awning. "Like she knows which one's going to drop next." By midweek, the preacher's son added more wood to the fire. "She touched our goat," he told the blacksmith. 2 days later, the kid came too early. That ain't natural. No one had ever heard Iris speak, and somehow that made it easier for people to speak for her. At the general store, a mother pulled her daughter behind her when Iris walked past, though all she held was a sack of flour. At the post office, someone spat near her boots. She didn't flinch, but her fingers tightened around the basket in her arms. Her steps grew quieter. Colter saw it. The way she folded into herself when they stared too long. He didn't ask. She didn't explain. But that silence, the one that once felt peaceful, now felt like tension pulled too tight. Then the ranch hand's boy fell ill. A fever high enough to rattle the walls. His mother wept beside the cot. The doctor was gone east for a wedding. No one else came. Iris did. She stepped into the barn where the boy lay, knelt beside him without asking permission, placed one hand on his chest, the other on his brow. She didn't pray. She didn't speak. She listened. Then she stood, walked out into the yard, and clipped herbs from the drying wall: lavender, feverfew, rabbit tobacco. She returned with a cloth and brewed the leaves down to bitter warmth. The boy drank it slowly, then slept. By sunrise, he was sitting up, weak but hungry. His mother cried and held Iris's hand in both of hers, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you." But the very next day, she could be heard at the well. How did she know what to do? I didn't even say what was wrong. She just knew. Fear returned like fog, low, creeping, clinging to the ankles. 3 days later, they came with torches. Not lit, but carried like promises. 8 of them. Men and women from town, boots caked in dust, faces tight with certainty. They stopped at the edge of the yard. Mr. Withers stepped forward first. His coat was too clean for a man who worked the land. "We want her gone," he said. Colter stood in the doorway of the house, arms crossed. His face was all hard timber and weather. "She's done nothing to you." "She hears things she ought not to," Withers said. "Sees what's coming before the sky even changes. Talks to animals like they answer back." A woman behind him hissed, "My steer dropped dead last week. She was the only one who laid hands on it." "You think she cursed it?" Colter asked. "I think she's cursed, period." Inside the house, Iris stood behind the curtain. She'd heard their boots on the gravel, seen the way they looked, not with hate, with certainty. And somehow that was worse. She moved toward the door, but Colter held up a hand. He stepped down from the porch and walked forward until he stood level with them all, the torches unlit between them. "I paid $1, he said, voice low but clear. "That's what she was worth to the man who tied her like livestock." He paused. "But she's listened to me more than anyone ever has. Not with ears, with her hands, with her breath, with her heart." He let that settle. "She's heard things I didn't even know I was saying." Someone in the crowd murmured, but no one stepped forward. "Run her off if you like," he said. "But you'll have to go through me." Withers opened his mouth, then shut it. The torches didn't move, and one by one, their hands loosened. Boots turned. Dust rose, and they left the way they came, quiet, unsure, unused to leaving without a fight. That night, the only sound in the cabin was the fire. Iris placed a pot of cider on the stove, then sat beside Colter at the table. She didn't reach for chalk. She didn't sign. She just reached out and placed her hand over his. Not thanks, not apology, just the truth, unspoken. He turned his palm over, let his fingers curl gently around hers. And in the quiet, they sat. Not because silence was all they had, but because it was finally enough. Snow came quiet that year. No storm, no warning. Just a slow sift of white that blanketed the ranch in silence deeper than usual. The fields softened. The sky hung low. Time stretched itself thinner.